This past weekend marked the 93rd Academy Awards, better known as the Oscars. It's Hollywood's biggest night, but for many reasons this year's Oscar show was a bit different. You know, the pandemic and stuff. And honestly, I usually love the Oscars, but I felt like the show was kind of boring this year. Except of course for the fact that I, as a Danish person, am going to have to give a huge shout out to Thomas Vinterberg and the whole crew behind Another Round, who took home the prize for Best International Film. And to think that it's for a film that so beautifully represents the Danish culture for drinking your brains out. I'm so proud. But that's not really what I wanted to talk about today. No, because these days the Oscars really aren't what they used to be. And for the last couple of years, Hollywood's most prestigious award has faced a lot of criticism. A couple of years ago, the internet was lit up by the hashtag OscarsSoWhite. The hashtag spawned back in 2015 as a response to the fact that all 20 nominees in the 4 different acting categories were white people. And as if that wasn't enough, in 2016, just 1 year later, it happened again. Not one single person of color was nominated in any of the 4 acting categories. Now, I'm not gonna sit here and say that the people who were nominated in 2015 and 2016 didn't deserve to get nominated. They're all talented actors, but let's be honest, in 2015, Meryl Streep was nominated for her role as the witch in Into the Woods. Honestly, she was just nominated because you have to nominate Meryl Streep, right? And are you seriously telling me that none of the actors in Selma, a film about Martin Luther King Jr. and the civil rights movement, which was nominated for Best Picture that same year, none of those actors deserve to get at least nominated? Even if you say that the right people were nominated for the right films, you've still gotta admit that it's a bit weird that none of those roles were offered to Black or Asian American actors. Clearly something was wrong. Now, the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences did try to include a few more racially diverse members after this critique. And in 2017, we did see a more diverse class of nominees, with Moonlight ultimately winning the Oscar for Best Picture that year.
Moonlight, you guys won Best Picture. Moonlight won. This is not a joke. Moonlight has won Best Picture. Moonlight, Best Picture.
Hashtag never forget. But let's not fool ourselves into thinking that that was the Oscars' only problem. Last year, like so many years before it, all nominees in the directing category were men. A fact that Issa Rae beautifully pointed out during the announcement of the nominations.
Thank you so much. Congratulations to those men.
And once again, I'm not saying that all of those guys didn't deserve to get nominated. But there are a ton of great female directors out there who just seem to get nominated less often. And clearly the Academy recognizes that they've had some problems with diversity through the years, because in September last year they announced their new inclusion and representation standards. Ooh, how fancy. Basically, these new representation standards are a set of requirements that a film has to live up to if they want to be eligible to win an Oscar. There are 4 different standards, but a film actually only has to live up to 2 of them in order to be eligible. The 4 standards are A. On-screen representation, themes, and narratives, which means that one of the main characters or significant supporting character has to come from an underrepresented racial or ethnic group. i.e. one of the main characters has to be Black, Asian, Native American, etc. It can also simply be achieved if the film's story is centered around a underrepresented group, like an ethnic group, women, LGBTQ+, or people with disabilities. B. Creative leadership and project team, which means that at least 2 of the following positions must be held by people from those underrepresented groups that I just mentioned. These positions include the director, the casting director, the cinematographer, the composer, costume designer, editor, hairstylist, makeup artist, producer, production designer, set decorator, sound, VFX supervisor, and the writer. This standard can also be met by having 30% of the crew consist of people from these underrepresented groups. C. Industry access and opportunity, which in short just means that the production or financing company behind the film must have trainee jobs and paid internships for people from the previously mentioned underrepresented groups. And D, audience development, which can be achieved if the film studio has multiple executives in its marketing, publicity, and or distribution teams from an underrepresented group, Those once again being women, racial or ethnic groups, LGBTQ+, or people with cognitive or physical disabilities. Phew, that was a bit of a mouthful. Now, when I first heard about these inclusion and representation standards, I really didn't like the idea. My first reaction was that this was going to force the studios to hire people just to check some boxes and not because those people were actually the best people for the job. But upon close inspection, it's not actually as bad as one might think. Actually, these standards might not mean anything at all to the films that are being produced. Like, take the first standard, on-screen representation. If one of your main supporting characters is a black guy, then you've met that criteria. And the second standard's even easier to achieve. Like, literally, if your makeup artist and your hairstylist are either women or gay, then you're A-okay. And I mean, not to perpetuate any stereotypes, but I feel like there's a pretty good chance that you'll be able to find either a female or a gay hairstylist for your film. So it appears that it's actually pretty easy to live up to the Academy's new representation standards. So are they even worth a damn? Can this actually have a notable influence on the film industry? Well, my short answer is no, probably not. These representation standards by themselves won't have much of an influence on the film industry. However, this might help start the conversation, because we definitely need to have a conversation about representation in the movies. The only way for anything to change is if we talk about it. And the representation standards, without giving them too much credit, might get the studios to think a bit more about who they hire for their films. Like, it really shouldn't be necessary to make quotas for how many of a certain group of people you have to hire, but as long as people don't have equal opportunities, regardless of their gender or the color of their skin, these kinds of checklists and quotas are kinda inevitable. And that's why I think what the Berlin Film Festival did last year is a bad idea. The Berlin Film Festival announced last year that they'll no longer have separate categories for actors and actresses. Instead, they've opted for a gender-neutral acting award. And on one hand, that's great. That should obviously be the goal. So this is where my camera died, and I had to wait till the next day before I could borrow a different camera from one of my friends. That is also part of the reason why this video is so late. So if you notice anything different with the ending of this video, that's why. Alright, well, back to the video. Acting is not like in sports where men might have some unfair physical advantage over women because of their gender. It really should be a level playing field for male and female actors. But I just don't think we're at a time where men and women would be judged equally if they were in the same category. Once again, that's obviously the goal. That's what we want to get to. But I just don't think we're quite there yet. Also, by separating the category into Best Actor and Best Actress, you get to celebrate and acknowledge double the amount of people. Of course, the situation with the Berlin Film Festival is different from the Oscars. For one, the group of people deciding who gets nominated at the Berlin Film Festival is much smaller. But I still think that a merging of the acting categories should be a goal for the Academy in the future. For now, I'd just be worried whether or not actresses would get the same amount of recognition as their male co-stars. So here we are. The Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences has implemented a new set of representation standards. They're pretty easy to get around, but at least it's a start. And when you're dealing with an almost 100-year-old institution like the Academy, you gotta know that they move pretty slowly. And you can't really expect change to come from one day to the next. But I do think that the Academy knows that they have to change if they want to be here in the next 100 years. Whether or not the representation standards have any impact, we'll have to wait and see, because they actually don't apply till the 2024 Oscars. But if this year's Oscars is anything to go off of, it definitely looks like representation is on the rise. But what do you think? Should the Academy merge the acting categories? Are the representation standards too much or not enough? Let's have a discussion in the comment section down below. And while you're down there, remember to tap that like button if you like this video, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you want more videos from me. But with that said, that's our show. My name's been Martin, thank you so much for watching, and until next time, take care and so long.